Welcome everybody. I made this video because I feel like a lot of adults either don't have basic cooking skills or they find that cooking for themselves can be overwhelming from a time management standpoint. As an athlete, it's really important to have healthy meals within arm's reach so you can recover well and you don't have to spend a lot of money either eating out or buying prepared meals that you would warm up at home. You'll see during this video that I'm fresh off of work, as evidenced by my threadbare Yeti hoodie, which is my go-to for working on bikes when the shop is cold. And during the hands-off part of cooking, I was able to get in a short core workout along with some PT exercises that I got the week before from Natalie at PedalFit. This recipe is an elk pot roast with vegetables. You could easily substitute some sort of lean cut of beef like I have round in place of elk. You could use any cut of beef, but some of the other ones are pretty high in fat, and with beef it's saturated fat, which is less healthy for you. So look for a lean cut of beef, and you can, get the same nutritional profile. So what I cooked up in this recipe ended up making about 5 large meals for me. They were small servings of meat and very heavy on the vegetables. So enjoy. And if you like this video, I will do more because I do this sort of meal prep almost every weekend. This is an elk shoulder roast from the elk that I hunted last year. It's, probably a couple of pounds. I've marinated it in buttermilk. Buttermilk is acidic and it can tenderize it some. I found that it kind of reduces the gaminess of it. Makes it taste elk tastes a lot like beef, kind of wild beef. The buttermilk helps make it taste more like beef, really, without imparting a lot of other flavors like a regular marinade. So that's marinated in buttermilk overnight. I've got a cup and a half of liquid here. That's half red wine and half broth. I don't have any homemade broth right now. I do that whenever I cook a chicken or something in the crock pot. I use this stuff. It just happened to be vegetable broth. Nice thing about cooking is it's not baking, it's not science. So, if a recipe, which I'm just following one off the internet, says a cup and a half of liquid, you just, this recipe said a cup and a half of wine. I didn't want to use all wine, so I mixed it up a little bit. It's going to turn out great no matter what. I've got my Instant Pot on saute. It has heated up. Step 1, before you brown meat, is to come over here, take this puppy outside, because it gets a little bit smoky. I'm going to put some avocado oil. You want to use an oil that has a high smoke point. Olive oil is not that great for this application. So vegetable oil, canola oil, I like avocado oil, and I'm just going to drop it in there. Gotta wash your hands, prevent cross-contamination. So I'm just gonna leave that there. You don't want to touch it. You want to let it just sit there. You want it to stick to the bottom just a little bit and leave some little meat bits on there, because once you pour the liquid in there, you're gonna scrape those off and they're really tasty in the kind of gravy, the sauce that forms while you cook all of your other stuff. So that's just gonna sit for a few minutes. Once it's formed a good brown bottom to it, we'll flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. You don't have to get every inch of the meat brown. It's just that browning it like this adds a lot of flavor and it helps with the texture of the meat. You could just throw it in there without doing this part, without searing it. You wouldn't have quite as much flavor on the meat. It doesn't have anything to do with keeping juices in the meat. That's kind of an old wives' tale. It just adds some flavor. So, gonna sear both sides of this and then show you the next step. Alright, I just flipped the meat over. You can see it's got some nice color, and it's got some little stuff stuck on the bottom there, just like I said. Should be really good. I'm going to get the other side, mixing up some herbs right now to go in the recipe. So the recipe calls for a tablespoon of herbs de Provence, which I do not have in my kitchen. It's a mixture of several herbs and spices, and so what I did was I mixed up a tablespoon. I found a recipe for herbs de Provence, and I just made a tablespoon or so of all of the parts of it that I have, and it's going to be great. It's a nice thing, again, about cooking is you can always substitute stuff, especially in something as scientific as just a pot roast. So the meat is seared on both sides. I'm going to pour my 1.5 cups of liquid in. While it cooks, it's going to pick up some of those little juicy bits off the bottom of the pan, and that is very flavorful. I'm going to add in my herbs and a teaspoon of salt. So I got to put this down. A little salt shaker from an antique store in Mountain View, Arkansas. I'm just going to stir that around a little bit. Get some of the bits off the bottom of the pan. Alright. Put the lid on. It is in the seal position, and I'm going to cancel my saute, hit manual, and take that up to 1 hour. I'm actually going to do a little longer than an hour. We're going to do 70 minutes. No, actually I will do it for an hour and see how it turns out. So 60 manual. There are lots of Instant Pot models out there. Basically what I found is get the size you want. Don't worry about all the preset stuff. It can be helpful, but as long as it has a saute button and it has a manual button where you can adjust the amount of time for cooking, you know, that's pretty much all you need. Delay start can be useful if you want to start cooking something like, you know, early in the morning for you to be ready when you're awake, but that's really about it. So that's going to go, it'll heat up, it'll cook for 60 minutes. I'll let it sit and just do a natural cool down, and then I'll add some vegetables to it and cook it for about 10 more minutes. So while that happens, I'm going to clean and chop some vegetables. So these are my vegetable ingredients. Yes, Taco, I know the camera beeped. I used a vegetable peeler, and I peeled 4 parsnips, 4 carrots. Definitely doesn't have to be perfect, you know, by any means. I don't even peel my potatoes. I wash them really well with a sponge, with like the scrubby side of a sponge, a clean sponge. Get in all the little nooks and crannies. If you use gold or red potatoes, you can do that. If you use russet potatoes, I usually peel those. That skin is not quite as tasty, but I really like the taste and texture of the skin of either red or gold potatoes, so I always just clean it really well and leave that on. So vegetables are cleaned and peeled, and I'm going to chop them up. If you haven't cooked much, you might wonder, how do I chop stuff up? Well, first, you need a good knife. Spend a little bit of money on a knife and a honer, and occasionally get your knife sharpened. Sharpening and honing is not the same thing. Look it up on the internet. I'm not going to explain it here. You want to make your food into a size that you want to eat. So don't make giant chunks of potatoes. The 2 things you have to take into consideration: the size you want to eat and how quickly it's going to cook. We're going to be cooking these vegetables about 10 minutes in the pressure cooker, which I know 10 minutes doesn't sound like very long, but in the pressure cooker it is a pretty long time. It's probably about like cooking them an hour or so in the oven. So they're going to soften up a lot. So I don't want to make tiny little, centimeter sized dices, but at the same time I also don't want giant chunks that I can't eat without cutting it up even more. So, I'm going to just chop my potato in half, probably quarter it, and cut it up into pieces about like that. So potatoes first, then I'll show you the carrots and parsnips. Parsnip, I will generally, and a parsnip, if you don't know what this is, it has a texture a lot like a carrot. It doesn't taste exactly the same. It's almost like you cross a potato and a carrot. I really like them. If you can't find them at your grocery store, or you don't want to chance something that you may not like, just put some extra carrots and potatoes in there, and it's kind of the same thing. So what I'll do is I'll cut the kind of stringy end off of it. I'll probably eat about that much. I've got my bowl here that I'm kind of dumping everything in. I'll cut the top off of it. This stuff I put in my bowl right over here for my chickens. I'll give that to them in the morning. And then the rest of this, again, I'm just going to cut it into, it's a little uneven, but I'm going to cut it into pieces that will cook approximately the same rate. So, the narrower part's just going to be a chunk. This top part, I'll probably, I'll go ahead and quarter it, and also cut it up into pieces. So, about like that. And I'll do the same thing with the carrot. The carrot's kind of the same thing. It's shaped the same, so you get the idea. I forgot, the recipe also calls for onion. I just cut this in half. I'm going to cut just the little top part off, so you see about that thick. Cut that off in both halves, about like that. At that point, I'm going to peel the papery part off, and you'll peel a layer that feels a little bit dry. It's kind of a between a nice thick onion slice and that papery outside part. Just peel that off. And since this is going to get cooked really hard, I'm going to leave the onion pretty big. Depending on what you're cooking, you can dice onion, you can cut it into little slices, but this is like the base. This is like how you start cutting an onion. Just cut it in half, cut the top off, and peel it. Leave that little bottom part on, because that's going to hold the little pieces of onion together while you do whatever it is you're doing to your onion. What I am doing is making big chunks, so the first thing I'll do is cut the bottom part off. But if you were going to dice it or make, little, like, thin slices of it, you would just leave that on. I'm going to cut it off about the same amount as the top. And then I'm just going to cut kind of quarters, just chunks of onion like that. I'll separate it a little bit. Onion is really good when you cook it like this in a stew or a pot roast. It gets really nice and sweet. My recipe called for 1 yellow onion. Just because I like it so much, I'm going to put 2 in there, because, that's how I roll. This is my last thing I have to cut. You'll see I have 34 minutes left on my cooking. It can sit with the Instant Pot. After it finishes its first cooking, you can let it sit for a little while, and it will kind of continue to cook while the temperature drops and the steam naturally releases. So what I'm going to do is, once I cut this other onion, I'm going to do some Pilates. Half an hour of Pilates. It's a great time if you're an athlete to just do some self-care. While you wait for something like this to cook, roll your legs, stretch, do a little yoga, do some Pilates. I have also some PT exercises that Natalie from Pedal Fit PT gave me. So I'm going to do that for the next, it'll take me about half an hour to do everything, half an hour to 40 minutes. And once I finish with that, I will flip the little thing on here and release all the steam, put these vegetables into the pot, and cook it for the last 10 minutes. Core workout's done. Physical therapy's done. Just flipped my little switch over here. It finished up while I was finishing up my workout. We're going to let the steam release. I'll open this up and dump these vegetables in, give it a little stir, set it for 10 more minutes. We're almost there. The roast in here, it's cooked through now. Any cooking now is just to make it, additional cooking is just to make it kind of fall apart tender. And I'll dump this stuff in there and give it a go. Alright, just let the steam out, and gonna poke these. Oh yeah, those are ready. Alright, gonna scoop this out, get it on a plate, and put the leftovers in these containers. That's it. That's pot roast. We just did that. It was like an hour and a half total. It's gonna be good. So there it is. It's my meat. I cut a little side off. Got my vegetables. Chopped it up. Good to go. Thanks everyone for watching, and let me know in the comments what you think of this. Do you want me to do stuff that is more basic? Do you want me to skip the really basic instruction parts and just stick to a recipe and cut it down a little bit? Just let me know what you would find to be helpful as an aspiring home cook. Thanks.